Adrian Cole was 44 years old, a man who had spent 11 years building something, and then deliberately stepped out of the frame so the thing could grow larger than he could carry it alone. He understood from a long time working in systems that the most important parts of any structure were the parts nobody looked at twice. His wife of 7 years had looked at him the same way, as background, as context, as the quiet man in the room while someone else held the room's attention. On a Wednesday evening in April, she told him she was filing for divorce. She said she needed someone with presence, someone who led from the front, someone the room looked at when he walked in. She was wearing a lapel pin from his company's annual summit when she said it. It was his company's pin, he noticed. He said nothing. He picked up his jacket and told her he would be in touch through an attorney. She had no idea what she was leaving, or why the man she was leaving him for answered to his name every Monday morning. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The server room hummed at 6:04 in the morning the way it had hummed every morning for 11 years, and Adrian Cole was the only one in the building who still found that sound reassuring. Adrian Cole had built Meridian Systems Group from a 2-person consultancy operating out of a rented office with second-hand furniture into a $22 million annual revenue enterprise software integration firm. He had done it over 11 years without press coverage, without an origin story told at conferences, without his name on the building. The name on the building was the company's name. His name was on the operating agreement in the bottom drawer of his desk, where it had been since the day he signed it. He drove a gray sedan he replaced every 5 years on schedule. He wore a plain chronograph watch he had bought at 32 because it kept accurate time and had a simple face. Every morning before 7 a.m., he reviewed the overnight system performance logs from the 3 enterprise clients whose integrations were still in active stabilization. He did this because he had built the systems and because the habit had never left him even after he stopped being the person technically responsible for it. He was the kind of man who built things to run without him. That was, in systems architecture, the highest standard. 2 years ago, he had brought in Victor Park as chief executive officer. Victor was skilled, press-savvy, the kind of executive who gave keynotes at industry summits and was profiled in regional business publications, and who understood, viscerally, how to be the person a room looked at when he walked in. Adrian had hired him specifically for those qualities, because they were qualities Adrian did not possess and did not want to develop. He had handed Victor the operational authority, the public profile, and the conference schedule. He had kept the ownership certificate, the board authority, and the bottom drawer. He held 67% of Meridian Systems Group. The company's current equity valuation, per the most recent independent assessment, was $18.4 million. His stake was worth $12.3 million. He had never found occasion to share this information with his wife in a way that made it land. She had not asked in a way that indicated she wanted it to land. He had mentioned the company the way people mentioned things they assumed the other person already knew, and she had received it the way people received information they had already filed as known and therefore uninteresting. He had met Renee at a fundraiser 7 years ago when she was running corporate events for a hospitality group, and he had attended as a client of the venue. She was dynamic, organized, understood a room before she was fully inside it. He had believed they understood each other. He had extended that belief with diminishing evidence for 7 years. He did not know yet that she had been making a different calculation for 8 months. He did not know yet that she had attended his company's annual summit 5 months ago in her professional capacity as an event coordinator, contracted coincidentally through a hospitality vendor the company used, and had met Victor Park at the podium, had understood Victor as the company, and had begun adjusting her life accordingly. He did not know yet, but he was about to. The kitchen was warm from the dinner she'd made that was still on the stove, untouched. Renee was at the kitchen table when he came in from the late site review. She was sitting the way she sat when she had already decided something. The particular stillness of a decision delivered, not discussed. She had a folder on the table. It had the name of a family law firm on the tab. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," she said. "I want to be honest with you about where I am." He set down his bag. He looked at the folder. He looked at her. "I love you. I do. But I've been living at half the life I want, and I don't think this is the right place for me to build the rest of it." She folded her hands. I want to be clear about that because I think you deserve honesty. I'm not going to pretend it's only about us. He said nothing. He's someone with real presence, someone who's in front, someone who builds things publicly, who the industry sees. I've been around people like that my whole career, and I know the difference between someone who's in the room and someone who's in the room. She looked at him with the specific kindness of someone delivering a verdict they believe is fair. You've always been in the background. That's not a criticism. It's just not what I need. He looked at her. He looked at the lapel pin on her jacket, the Meridian Systems Group annual summit pin, the ones the hospitality staff were given at check-in. The design was a small geometric mark in silver that his branding team had approved and that he had signed off on in a Tuesday meeting 2 years ago. She was wearing it on the jacket she had worn to work that day. He noticed it the way he noticed things. He said nothing about it. He did not say anything about Victor Park, whose name she had not used, but whose description he recognized with complete precision. He did not say anything about the Monday morning call, held weekly in the company's second-floor conference room, where Victor Park presented operational updates to the board, and the board consisted of 3 people, the 2 outside directors and Adrian Cole. He did not say anything about the ownership certificate. He picked up his bag. "I'll be in touch through an attorney," he said. He went to his office. He sat at his desk. He looked at the bottom drawer for a moment. He opened it. The original operating agreement, 11 years old, the paper slightly yellowed at the edges, his signature on the last page, was exactly where it had always been. He closed the drawer. He picked up his phone and called Harriet. 3 years before that Wednesday, Adrian Cole had done something that took 18 months, and that he had not told anyone outside the transaction about. Renee had wanted to start her own events management company, not work for a hospitality group, her own firm, her own clients, her name on the invoice. She had the instinct for it and the professional network and the particular intelligence for logistics that the work required. She did not have the startup capital. Adrian had structured a personal loan, $70,000, no interest, no formal repayment schedule, that he had set up through a simple private agreement and had never once referenced in conversation. He had wanted her to have the business. He had not wanted the business to feel like his contribution. The firm had built 3 steady clients in its first year. By the second year, she had 6. She spoke about it with the authority of someone who had built it herself, which, in the ways that mattered, she had. He had just made sure the runway was there. There was a man named Desmond who had been Adrian's first engineering hire at Meridian 11 years ago and who had stayed through every phase of the company's growth, now managing a team of 14. Desmond had said to Adrian once, during a late-night release deployment in the 3rd year of the company, "You know what I've figured out about you? You never need to be the hero of the story. You just need the story to come out right." Adrian had nodded and moved on to the next line item. He had thought about what Desmond said more than once in the years after. He had noticed, in the year before the Wednesday in April, a particular shift in how Renee engaged with his work. Not less interest. She had never shown intense interest, but a new quality to her disengagement, the specific register of someone who had decided something and was organizing their life around the decision without announcing it. He had told himself it was the natural distance of 2 people with separate professional worlds. He had extended that interpretation for longer than the evidence held. That was what she hadn't understood until the disclosure. Her name was Harriet Osey. She was 64 years old, a corporate attorney who had drafted the Meridian Systems Group Operating Agreement 11 years ago in a small conference room with 2 clients and a printer that kept jamming, and who had served as the company's outside general counsel ever since. She was tall and precise, with close-cropped silver hair and reading glasses she kept at the end of her nose, and the particular professional stillness of someone who had read enough legal documents to understand that most disasters announced themselves in the fine print before they arrived. She called Adrian on the Thursday after the Wednesday. "I've been reviewing your marital asset exposure since you called me Tuesday," she said. It was 6:21 in the morning. "I want to meet with you before you engage the divorce attorney. There are things you need to understand about how this proceeding will see your ownership position." He met her at her office at 7:30. She was at her desk with the company formation documents, 3 years of financial statements, and the most recent independent equity valuation. I'm going to walk you through what a marital asset disclosure looks like from the other side of this table, she said, because I have reason to believe your wife's attorney is not going to know what they're looking at until we show them. She opened the first document. Meridian Systems Group founded your ownership stake 67%. The company's current independent equity valuation conducted 4 months ago for the Series B preparation work. She set the valuation report on the desk. 84 million unders. Your share of that, she said, is $12, 3 million unders. She set the ownership certificate beside the valuation, his name, the percentage, the date of the original formation, and each subsequent confirmation. 11 years of documentation, clean and complete. This is a marital asset. It will be on the disclosure. What it is worth is not negotiable. It is what it is worth. She thinks it's a board position, Adrian said. Harriet looked at him over her reading glasses. I know what she thinks, she said. I also know what the disclosure will say. She turned to the next document. I want you to understand something about what happens when someone signs a divorce settlement without understanding what they are signing away. I've seen it go 2 ways. We need it to go the right way. She was not saying this to reassure him. She was saying it because she had watched Adrian build this company for 11 years, and because she had a professional obligation to make sure he understood the full picture before anyone else drew it for him. There's one more matter, Harriet said. She placed a printed email on the desk. A brief professional message sent to Victor Park's company account 3 weeks ago from an address Adrian recognized as Renee's personal email. The message was warm, social, referencing their conversation at an industry event and suggesting they find a time to connect. Victor had forwarded it to Adrian's board address with a 1-line note. Want to make sure you're aware. Please advise. Victor forwarded it to you immediately, Harriet said. He didn't respond to her. He wanted you to know first. Adrian looked at the email. He looked at Victor's forwarded note. He thought about the operating agreement in the bottom drawer. He stood up from the chair. He went to the window. Harriet's office was on the 7th floor, and the morning was clear, and the city was already moving. He looked at it for a moment. Then he came back. She doesn't know the structure, he said. It was not a question. She has signed joint tax returns that reference the LLC income for 6 consecutive years, Harriet said. She has never asked what the company was worth. People rarely ask about assets they have decided are not significant. She closed her folder. We will make the disclosure. We will present the documentation. The valuation speaks for itself. She looked at him. How do you want to handle Victor's participation in the settlement proceeding? Adrian thought about it for exactly the time it took to think about it. Invite him as a company representative, he said. He's the CEO. If they want to discuss the company's valuation, he can speak to the operational picture. Harriet nodded. She made a note. He didn't move fast. That was the thing she had never once thought to calculate about him. She had spent 7 years deciding what Adrian Cole was. A quiet man, competent, steady, someone who managed a small technology firm from a background position. She had watched Victor Park take the stage at the annual summit and had made a decision about what power looked like and where it lived. She had looked at the visible thing and missed the load-bearing thing entirely. He had been building systems long enough to know the difference between what ran the machinery and what people looked at when they walked through the door. The morning of the settlement meeting, he arrived 22 minutes early, sat in the chair at the near end of the conference table, and opened the bottom drawer folder Harriet had compiled. He had been through every page. He went through it once more. He closed it. He set his hands flat on the table. He waited. The conference room was on the 9th floor of Harriet's building. Long table, clean walls, a window looking south over the financial district. Harriet arrived at 9:40. Reginald Cross, the divorce and settlement specialist, arrived at 9:44. They arranged the documentation. The room had the particular quiet of people who had done this kind of work before and understood what was about to happen. Renee arrived at 10:02 with her attorney, a man named Castillo. She was composed, well prepared, carrying the asset schedule she had built with his help over the previous 3 weeks. She moved with the assurance of someone who had determined the room's outcome before she entered it. She glanced at Adrian once, a brief, calibrating glance, and then looked toward the attorneys. The door opened again at 10:06. Victor Park came in. He was dressed the way Victor dressed for formal meetings, a good suit, the specific ease of a man who had been in many rooms, and had learned how to be the right temperature in all of them. He came through the door with the professional confidence that had made him, in Adrian's assessment, exactly the right person to run Meridian's operations. Then he saw the table. He saw Adrian on one side. He saw the woman across from Adrian, the woman from the industry event email, whose name he had not spoken aloud to Adrian, but had forwarded carefully and immediately to the board address. He saw her. He saw Adrian. He looked at the room with the specific expression of a man who was very quickly assembling a structure he had not known he was standing in. Harriet introduced him neutrally. Victor Park, Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Systems Group, present as a company representative for the purposes of valuation questions. Renee's attorney said, "We understand the company is a relatively minor marital asset, and we'd like to address the primary." "Let's address the disclosures first," Reginald said. He opened the folder. He began placing documents on the table. The first was the ownership certificate. He read the relevant section aloud. Adrian Cole, 67% equity interest, Meridian Systems Group, LC. The original formation date. Each subsequent confirmation. Renee was looking at the certificate. The second document, Reginald said, is the independent equity valuation. He set it flat on the table. 18 Tormine Fawners. Mr. Cole's equity interest, $12, subject to standard valuation adjustments. The room went quiet, not the polite quiet of a proceeding in progress, the specific, weighted stillness of a number that has just changed the shape of everything in the room. Renee's attorney picked up the valuation report. He read the cover page. He turned to the methodology section. He looked at his client. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the ownership certificate, at the percentage, the name, the formation date, the 11-year history of a company she had attended an event for, had received a lapel pin from, had described to her attorney as a minor board position worth a rounding error on the marital assets schedule. Castillo said carefully, "We'll need time to review." "Of course," Harriet said. "We've also included 6 years of joint tax returns, each of which references the LLC income, for your review." Victor Park had not moved since he sat down. He was looking at Adrian with the expression of a man who had just understood a conversation that had been happening in a language he didn't know he was missing. The Monday morning calls, the board approval for his own compensation, the chairman who had hired him, who had handed him operational authority with a specific and deliberate clarity about where the boundaries were, the chairman whose wife had emailed him about getting coffee. He was a professional. He said nothing. He sat with it. Adrian looked at Renee. She was still looking at the ownership certificate. He waited until she looked up. He said it without volume, not for the room, just as the record stated accurately. "You went after the CEO," Adrian said. "The CEO works for me." He held the look for as long as it took to be sure she understood. Then he was done. He stood. He picked up his folder. He buttoned his jacket. He shook Reginald's hand. He shook Harriet's hand. He walked toward the door. He stopped. He looked at Victor. "Monday call is still at 9, he said. "I'll see you then." Victor nodded once. His voice was even and professional. "Yes, sir," he said. Adrian walked out. It did not happen all at once. The settlement negotiations ran 8 weeks. The equity valuation was the central matter, and the central matter was not negotiable. What a company was worth was what it was worth. Reginald managed the process with the precision of someone who had done this many times and understood that documentation was not argument, it was simply fact. The final settlement reflected a proportional share of the marital assets as the law required, which was different in every meaningful way from what Renee had expected to receive. Her events management firm continued. She had built it genuinely, and she ran it well, and it was hers. The business was real, and Adrian had never wanted anything from it. He had funded the runway because she had needed a runway, and he had wanted her to have it. He did not ask for anything back. That had never been the point. Victor Park continued as CEO. He was good at the work, and the work was his, and the Monday calls were the Monday calls. Adrian noticed, in the months that followed, that Victor's operational reports had become more thorough, the financial summaries more precise, the agenda items more carefully sequenced. He did not mention this to Victor. He assumed Victor had arrived at his own conclusions about the value of knowing what was in the room. Desmond, the first engineer, now a department head, stopped by Adrian's office one afternoon in November with a question about a client integration and stayed for 20 minutes, talking about nothing in particular, which was how Adrian knew something was on his mind. Finally, Desmond said, Heard things went sideways for you this year. They did, Adrian said. Desmond was quiet for a moment. Company's running well, he said. I know, Adrian said. I built it that way. Desmond nodded. He asked his question about the client integration. Adrian answered it. Desmond left. Harriet sent something through the mail 14 months after the settlement. No note, just a small plant in a simple pot, the kind that grew without complaint and had a reputation for patience. He put it on the windowsill in his office between the monitor and the window, where the afternoon light reached it. He watered it on Thursdays. On a Sunday evening in late November, Adrian Cole sat at his desk after dark with the original operating agreement open in front of him. He took it out once a year and read through it, not because it needed to be reviewed, but because it was the beginning of the thing, and he liked to remember what the beginning looked like. His signature on the last page, 11 years ago. His partner's signature since bought out. The company name. The formation clauses, each one the product of a specific decision made in a specific moment that had accumulated into what Meridian was now. He read it through. He set it flat on the desk. He looked at it for a while. From down the hall, the server room hummed the way it had hummed every morning and evening for 11 years. The same hum, the same reliability, the same invisible architecture running correctly in the background, while everything else in the building changed and grew. He put the operating agreement back in the bottom drawer. He closed it. He turned off the desk lamp. He got his jacket from the chair. His name was on the agreement. His name had been on it for 11 years. In the morning, the company would continue to run, and he would continue to build. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.